Jung had the fascinating idea that neuroses reflect problems at the level of the personal unconscious, while psychoses reflect problems at the deeper level of the collective unconscious. Jung wrote, "Psychotic contents show peculiarities that defy reduction to individual determinants, just as there are dreams where symbols cannot be properly explained with the aid of personal data. By this I mean that neurotic contents can be compared with those of normal complexes, whereas psychotic contents, especially in paranoid cases, show close analogies with the type of dream that the primitive calls a big dream. Unlike ordinary dreams, such a dream is highly impressive, numinous, and its imagery frequently makes use of motifs analogous to or even identical with those of mythology. I call these structures archetypes because they function in a way similar to instinctual patterns of behavior. Moreover, most of them can be found everywhere and at all times. Wouldn't you love to have a mythological dream? Wouldn't you love to feel as if you had entered mythology? Imagine mixing with the gods and heroes of old. Imagine fighting with Achilles at Troy, or being one of Jason's crew of heroes on the Argo. If you can lucid dream, don't you want to see if you can conjure a mythological lucid dream? We have fear and resistance towards our complexes. They spell trouble. It's so much easier to avoid them. In Jungian therapy, the task is not to indulge repression, but to put the emphasis on integration, to bring back and deal with what we have repressed. Jung said that complexes were responsible for slips of the tongue, Freudian slips. He wrote, "Complexes can slip just the wrong word into one's mouth, they make one forget the name of the person one is about to introduce, they cause a tickle in the throat just when the softest passage is being played on the piano at a concert, they make the tiptoeing latecomer trip over a chair with a resounding crash. They bid us congratulate the mourners at a burial instead of condoling with them, they are the instigators of all those maddening things we confront so helplessly." Complexes appear in personified form in dreams. They appear as the external voices in psychoses, such as schizophrenia. Jung understood spirits, supposedly external beings, as projections of complexes. The complexes are capable of overpowering the central ego complex, consciousness. They can disrupt consciousness, insinuate themselves into consciousness and take control of, and dominate, the personality. When this happens, neurosis ensues. Everyone with mental health problems is under the control of complexes. Intrusive thoughts are driven by complexes. Trauma causes division of the psyche. Bits split off, or, we might say, they are ejected from the central psyche so as not to disrupt and destabilize it. Although they are exiled from the central psyche, they do not of course vanish from the psyche. They haunt the personal unconscious as complexes, and they exert influence over the psyche, especially when anything happens that triggers the same trauma that caused the formation of the complex in the first place. The psyche has an incredible tendency to dissociate. We might say that the unitary consciousness is linked to a fragmented personal unconscious, comprised of a broad cast of complexes. When people suffer from dissociative identity disorder, DID, aka multiple personality disorder, they have succumbed to takeover by the personal unconscious and its various complexes. The personal unconscious is the home of autonomous splinter psyches, or sub-personalities, which can sabotage the overall personality. Jung wrote, "Complexes are in truth the living units of the unconscious psyche." Wikipedia says, Jung distinguished between two types of unconscious mind, the personal unconscious and collective unconscious. The personal unconscious was the accumulation of experiences from a person's lifetime that could not be consciously recalled. The collective unconscious, on the other hand, was a sort of universal inheritance of human beings, a species memory passed on to each of us. Jung believed the personal unconscious was dominated by complexes, and the collective unconscious by archetypes. Complexes were so central to Jung's thinking that his original name for what he did was complex psychology. Wikipedia says, Jung found evidence for complexes very early in his career in the word association tests conducted at the Bergsley, the psychiatric clinic of Zurich University, where Jung worked from 1900 to 1908. With a word association test, a researcher reads a list of words to a subject who is asked to say, as quickly as possible, the first thing that comes to mind in response to each word. The subject's reaction time for each word is carefully measured. The researcher notes any unusual reactions, whether hesitations, long delays, slips of the tongue, signs of emotion or stress, and so on. All of these hint at unconscious feelings, beliefs, traumas, taboos, etc. Jung regarded a response time that was particularly long, or an associated word that was uncommon, nonsense, or not remembered on recall, or accompanied by strong emotion, as a complex indicator, as a clear sign of an unconscious psychological conflict and issue. Wikipedia says, in Jung's theory, complexes may be conscious, partly conscious, or unconscious. Complexes can be positive or negative, resulting in good or bad consequences. There are many kinds of complex, but at the core of any complex is a universal pattern of experience, or archetype. Two of the major complexes Jung wrote about were the anima, a node of unconscious beliefs and feelings in a man's psyche relating to the opposite gender, and animus, the corresponding complex in a woman's psyche. Other major complexes include the mother, father, hero, and more recently, the brother and sister. Jung believed it was perfectly normal to have complexes because everyone has emotional experiences that affect the psyche. Although they are normal, negative complexes can cause us pain and suffering. Where Freud spoke only about the sexual Oedipus complex, reflecting developmental challenges that face every young boy, and its female equivalent, the Electra complex, Jung believed there were many different kinds of complex. Jung wrote, "Everyone knows nowadays that people have complexes. What is not so well known, though far more important theoretically, is that complexes can have us." The existence of complexes throws serious doubt on the naive assumption of the unity of consciousness, which is equated with psyche, and on the supremacy of the will. Every constellation of a complex postulates a disturbed state of consciousness. The complex must therefore be a psychic factor which, in terms of energy, possesses a value that sometimes exceeds that of our conscious intentions, and in fact, an active complex puts us momentarily under a state of duress, of compulsive thinking and acting, for which under certain conditions the only appropriate term would be the judicial concept of diminished responsibility. A feeling-toned complex is the image of a certain psychic situation which is strongly accentuated emotionally and is, moreover, incompatible with the habitual attitude of consciousness. It has a relatively high degree of autonomy, so that it is subject to the control of the mind to only a limited extent, and therefore behaves like an animated foreign body in the sphere of consciousness. This idea of a complex as a foreign body, or an autonomous being, is critical. It means that we are all surrounded, in a manner of speaking, by a constellation of complexes and archetypes, each of which can invade and subvert our consciousness. We are often not in charge of our behavior. Consciousness cedes control to alternative personalities which have their own agenda, often very different from what we would ever contemplate consciously. Consciousness, since it does not know and understand what the unconscious is doing to it, how the unconscious modifies it, simply invents stories to tell itself about its apparent behavior. It's constantly rationalizing and narratizing, but it has extremely little genuine self-knowledge. How can it when it has so little knowledge of what the unconscious is doing to it?